Is the president right on the money when it comes to the Dems and taking more of your dough? Let's ask Republican presidential candidate and former governor of Arkansas, my buddy Mike Huckabee. Good to see you, Governor. Now,
pleasure to be with you, David.
Under this president, the federal budget, as you well know, has increased 42% in 6.5 years. Why should we believe that Republicans are any better at keeping spending under control with this record than Democrats?
Well, they certainly haven't had a good record so far, and I think one of the reasons that Republicans got whacked in the 2006 election was because of spending, and also because they didn't handle corruption very well. They didn't handle Katrina very well, and frankly, they didn't do the job they were hired to do. They got fired. They're going to have to do some convincing spending cuts in this session of Congress if they're going to get some credibility back.
Well, spending
but I hope
cuts,
they do. I think
it's not only spending cuts by Congress, it's also the president pulling out that veto pen. President Ford was in office, as you know, 2.5 years. In 2.5 years, he vetoed 7 appropriations bill. President Bush in power 6.5 years, not one. So he's got to start vetoing, doesn't he?
I think he does, and he's indicated that he's going to be spilling some ink out on the bills that come his way. I think if he doesn't, it's going to be very, very challenging for Republicans to get some traction again with the people on fiscal responsibility.
Well, who do you blame for the Republicans dropping the ball on this, the president or Republican Congress?
Well, I think you have to lay some blame across the board. I think Republicans in Congress start with, they're the ones who are the appropriators, and certainly they have the initial responsibility. But I think the president, probably so as not to just create a confrontational environment, even though I'm not sure that his failure to veto lessened any of a confrontational environment. So maybe he's realizing that the American people, and particularly Republicans, are expecting him to say no to some of the amazing spending that's been going on in the past.
Now, Mike, of course, you are a Republican candidate, as we mentioned. Let's talk about you. In 2005, you got a record that needs a little explanation. The Free Market Institute, the Cato Institute, which I'm sure you know, rated you down near the bottom list of its big-time spenders, saying that you deserved the letter D as a grade because of your spending habits. How do you respond?
Well, actually, spending that I had control over as a governor rose less than 0.5% for each of the 10.5 years that I was governor.
So why did Cato give you a D?
Well, because what they do, they put a template over all 50 states, and they don't factor in how each state has its own separate way of budgeting, and each state has its own constitution. You don't have a one-size-fits-all with the 50 states. And so it's the grading process they had that ought to get the D, or maybe even the F, because if you don't look at each state carefully and how they budget, you're not going to get an accurate picture when you don't factor in things like federal pass-through, budget appropriations, Medicaid that's an entitlement so states don't have control over it. There are a number of factors. Yeah. So if you look at the factors that we had control over, have a pretty darn good record.
So, Mike, if you had to boil it down to a bumper sticker, like kill the IRS or something like that, what would you say to appeal to voters to say that you're going to do something very different when it comes to taxing and spending in America?
Well, I support the fair tax, David, and the fair tax would eliminate all of the tax on productivity, wages, and gain, and it would replace it with a consumption tax that's so easy that a 7-year-old running a lemonade stand could understand it, and we would save literally about $250 billion a year in compliance. We'd bring $10 trillion that's parked offshore from American companies back to being working capital in this country, and I'd have the great joy of being the president that nails a going out of business sign on the IRS, ending it, and April 15th would be just another beautiful spring day in America.
All right, Governor Mike Huckabee, I look forward to seeing you again and seeing you play blues guitar with Jimmy Thackeray, by the way. We hope to see that sometime soon.
Hope to be doing that soon, David.
All right, Mike, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.